is a special edition of NBC 10 at Issue with Philadelphia Independent Mayoral candidate Wali Diop.
And good evening. I'm Steve Highsmith. Welcome to another special edition of NBC 10 at Issue. In 2 weeks, voters in Philadelphia select the mayor for the next 4 years. 3 candidates, very different candidates, are on the ballot. Democrat and incumbent Michael Nutter, Republican Karen Brown, and my guest this evening, independent candidate Wali Diop Rahman.
How you doing from there, right? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wali Diop Rahman, independent candidate, all right?
34-year-old Wali Diop Rahman racking up votes in Clark Park.
Hey, sister, how you doing, sis? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Diop Ulugbala, president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, is running as an independent under his legal name, Wali Rahman.
On a platform calling for economic development for our communities as opposed to police containment. If you provide the same people who right now are fighting each other over crumbs, if you provide them with a real legitimate way to feed themselves and their families, I think we'll see an overnight decrease, a drastic decrease in incidents of violence and crime in our city. You know, right now the city's spending over $1 billion on police, prisons, and courts. Programs like Stop and Frisk, which target, particularly Black and Latino men.
No fan of Mayor Michael Nutter, Diop believes a politician has to be more than black.
Not just enough to be black, but you also must have a program that speaks to the interests of not just the black community, but of working and poor people who make up the majority of the city's population.
Diop sees the flash mob issue as youth crying out, the drug problem as misunderstood too. Ex-offenders, he says, don't want that life.
They weren't asking me, where can I score my next kilo of cocaine? They were saying, we need jobs. That's what we need.
Diop is still outraged by his 2009 arrest in city council chambers.
I was isolated and individually picked out by the civil affairs police and attacked brutally. Even before they identified themselves as cops, they initially rushed me, put me in a chokehold, and put me under arrest, simply for holding up a sign calling for an end to this public policy of police containment and calling for economic development.
And economic development is his tool of justice, though he sees the new shopping center at Jefferson and 52nd as not the real answer.
You've got to be happy about this shopping center in one sense, because folks, until this was here in last generation, had to go far away to be able to go to a Lowe's or go to a ShopRite.
Well, the problem I have with it is that although you have, convenience in terms of location, what happens to the money? All the money that's being spent at ShopRite, at Lowe's, we spend a lot of money there every day. But none of that money is going back into the community. We put money in Wells Fargo, but none of the money that Wells Fargo
Some of it
has
is if local neighborhood people are being hired at these locations, isn't it? That's staying in the community.
But they are forced in turn to shop right back in the same one they work for.
He says what's missing is black-owned business. As he spreads the word, Wali Diop Rahman believes the call is getting out.
This is going to be the next mayor of Philadelphia.
How you doing, my brother? Yeah.
Wali Diop Rahman.
And that the response is growing too.
I like the way you talk.
November 8th.
I'm a Democrat, but maybe I might go independent.
I hope you do. I hope you do.
And with me now is Wali Diop Rahman, independent candidate for mayor. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Steve. How you doing?
All right, Diop, if you were mayor, how would the city be different?
The city will be different because we're talking about economic development for the historically oppressed Black and Latino community. We're talking about jobs, businesses, fully funded and community-controlled education system that really serves the needs of the communities that they're supposed to serve, as opposed to what we see now in the form of a public policy of police containment.
All right. I'm going to deal with police containment in just a moment.
Yes.
But when you talk about, say, Occupy Philadelphia that's out there right now, I'm trying to get an idea of the image of the city. Do you think if you were mayor, Occupy Philadelphia would be protesting right now outside City Hall?
I think that it should be protesting, not
Even
necessarily
if you were mayor.
protesting me. In fact, I would be right alongside the protesters of Occupy Philly, because the existence of the so-called 1% is real, whether I become mayor of Philadelphia or not. But the real issue is that as a mayor of Philadelphia, I would be fighting for the same demands that the participants of Occupy Philly are raising up right now.
So you would not forcibly remove them?
Oh, no.
You'd let them stay there as long as they want it.
I would not only endorse Occupy Philly, but I would also call on the participants of Occupy Philly to recognize that, generally speaking, there has been a historic oppression of the African community, of the Latino community, and the Wall Street, the banksters, the corporations that my opponent is affiliated with right now. In fact, all of the wealth that they enjoy comes at the expense of these communities that I'm talking about right now.
Would you let Tea Party groups stay as long as they want it on the other side of City Hall?
I think that as long as the demands being raised up by participants in Occupy Philly are consistent with the principles of my campaign and my platform, they would have a legitimate right to voice their opinions.
Occupy, but what about Tea Party? What about someone that's on the right wing?
As long, as I said, as long as the demands being held up are consistent with the principles of economic development, not for the benefit of one community at the expense of another community, but real legitimate economic development, making the resources that are created by...
Should a mayor or a city council person be the one to decide that prism, as to whether or not they're legitimate in that? If these people want to come out and just protest, shouldn't you just let them all protest?
Well, no, I strongly believe that a mayor has a responsibility to uphold truly democratic principles, not draconian, fascist, anti-democratic principles like that, which we see right now.
All right, let's go to a question that came in. Erica emailed us a question, and she asked, Philadelphia has long been a city, she says, closely associated with intense police corruption, police brutality, and police murders. Her question, how do you plan to address these issues and maintain effective public safety in the city?
Well, firstly, I'm calling for a community-controlled police advisory board with the power to subpoena, as well as hire, fire police administration and officers who are found to be guilty of violating the rights and committing acts of brutality, etc., against the people of Philadelphia. And this is essentially what the litmus test for real honorable police conduct in our community would be.
How do you keep the city safe?
determined.
And what happens to the police department if you're mayor?
The police department would function under the supervision of this community-controlled advisory board.
Would it be the same size it is now?
Well, there would be a drastic budget cut to the police department. I believe strongly that right now what we see in terms of police activity is sucking up the people's resources. Right now, over $1 billion are being spent on police, prisons, and courts. Programs like Stop and Frisk, which specifically target the Black and Latino community.
Later on, but I want to ask you about the police size. So we have 6,000 to 7,000 people, maybe 1,500, 2,000 available on any given day, shift, or whatever. How many would be in your department?
Well, again, the programs such as Stop and Frisk, the curfew, and other policies that I'm in strong disagreement with determine the size of the police department. So therefore, I'm saying that as the programs of anti-democratic police activity are cut, so should the size of the police force be cut. And at the same time,
can you give us
there should be an increase.
An idea of what that cost savings would be?
Well, I would say anywhere from 80 to 90% of police activity via Stop and Frisk right now was determined that 93% of those who were stopped by the police through this program were not even arrested or found guilty or charged with any crime at all. They were simply stopped by the police.
We have too many police officers?
I certainly believe we have too many police officers.
So should we have half that number?
But the real problem is not just the size of the police department, but the relationship that the police have with the community.
All right, we'll continue this ahead. Wali Diop Rahman on flash mobs, and I'm Amia Abu Jamal, and others still to come on NBC 10 at Issue. Stay tuned.
You're watching the special edition of NBC 10 at Issue.